member of the Imam's Council of Michigan. He studied Islamic law, hadith, Quranic exegesis under qualified scholars. He holds multiple traditional ijazat, and he served as an Imam in Detroit and Hamtramck. Welcome, Imam Dawud. So,
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على نبينا وحبيبنا وعظيمنا محمد المصطفى وعلى آله الأصفياء وصحبه الأتقياء والتابعين لهم بخير وإحسان إلى يوم الجزاء. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ونعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع. اللهم طهر قلوبنا من الرياء والنفاق وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وسلم. Brothers and sisters in Islam, um, it's my pleasure to be here with you. Again, I'm your needy brother Dawud, Director of Care Michigan for quite a while. And what we will be going over in the next 3 Thursdays, B'idhnillahi ta'ala, this is not meant to be a lecture, but more so of a class, and I will be asking you some questions, and inshallah, this is interactive. And outside the interactive sessions, then we'll have Q&A at the end based upon what's presented. But I will be presenting basically what is in the contents of a book that I wrote about 5 years ago called Towards Sacred Activism. You can purchase it online in Mecca Books if you like, or it's even on Amazon. Though I suggest not getting it from Amazon, you're going to pay more. Right. The second edition of it's going to be coming out soon. And the book is grounded in relating to how we can follow some guidelines according to the sacred law that makes our, inshallah, our activism acceptable to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Right? Because at the end of the day, and we will touch on this more as we go on, I will continue saying this over and over and over again, but ultimately for each and every one of us as people of faith, our ultimate objective is not a material outcome. Our ultimate objective is Allah, is His rida, is His pleasure. And even if we were to get short term a worldly outcome that we think we're looking for, and we do it in a manner that displeases Allah, then actually we failed. We're losers. We're not winners, even if it appears to be like we got some sort of short social political achievement or outcome. We've lost. Um, Before I go into the subject matter, what is traditional? How many of you know what is a musalsal bil awaliya? You ever heard this term before? A musalsal bil awaliya? Sisters, brothers? Okay, we're going to start right here. This is very important. Anytime someone studies with a traditional student, a traditional teacher, what's called talabul ilm, or studying with a sheikh or an ustad, before going to any subject, the first thing that is covered is a musalsal bil awaliya. This is the first hadith that students of knowledge take from their sheikh when they formally study. So your brother here, I've gotten ijazah in this hadith, and I've heard this hadith from several of my teachers, both here and abroad. So I've heard this hadith from Habib Ali al-Jafri from Yemen, who heard it from his sheikh Abu Bakr al-Mashhur, right? And I've also heard this hadith from Sheikh Hassan ibn Ali al-Saqaf from Jordan, who heard this from his sheikh in Egypt, Sheikh Abdullahi ibn Muhammad ibn Sadiq al-Qumari. And I heard this from one of my direct teachers, Sheikh Abdul Mutnim ibn Abdul Aziz al-Qumari in Morocco, in Tanja. And I heard this from one of my teachers, Sheikh Muhammad bin Yahya Ninawi, who's in Atlanta, Georgia, who took from his sheikh, Sheikh Muhammad Yassin al-Fadani, and others that I've taken this hadith from. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن ارحموا أهل الأرض يرحمكم أهل السماء. This is the first riwayah of it. The second one is الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن يرحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. It is those who show mercy shall be shown mercy by Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, meaning Allah. Whoever shows mercy to people in the earth shall be shown mercy by the people of As-Sama, the heavens. And scholars say uh, Ahlus Sama means the Malaika are praying for mercy upon those who show mercy to people on earth. So this is the meaning of hadith. Scholars differ upon it, whether it's sahih li ghairihi, meaning it is vigorously authenticated through corroborating evidence, whether it's hasan, well authenticated, lakin in the chain of this that goes to the companion Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, the tabi is named Abu Qabus, who was reportedly a freed slave of Abdullah ibn Amr. Abu Qabus is what's known as majhul, meaning he is unknown, meaning we have no biographical information about him. But the meaning of this hadith is true and is corroborated by other hadith, like men la yarham la yarham. Whoever doesn't show mercy should not receive mercy, right? So again, those who show mercy shall be shown mercy by the most merciful. Whoever, so show mercy to the people in the earth, and you shall be shown mercy to the beings of the heaven, right? So, and this is a very important principle when we're talking about activism, okay? But this is the first hadith. So, I I give you all ijaza or permission to narrate this hadith from me based upon the permission I got and the asanid from my teachers based upon what you understand from this hadith. This is called ijaza, right? So, inshallah, when we finish this, I will give you, inshallah, ijaza just for a musalsul bil awaliya, going back from one of my shuyukh, going back to Ibn Tulun at Dimashqi, a Hanafi, that goes back to the Sahabi, that goes back to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is also something very important in Islam when we're talking about our sacred law that we're getting to in our beliefs. There's one thing that distinguishes Islam from Judaism and Christianity. There's several things. There's one very important thing. No Jewish person can go to the Talmud or their modern day Torah and say, I learned from my rabbi who learned from his rabbi in a chain of transmission that is unbroken back to Musa alayhi salam. Doesn't exist. Mishmel Jude. No Christian can go and say, I have a chain going back from my teacher to my teacher to my teacher, back to Isa alayhi salam with the Injil. It doesn't exist. However, al-isnad min ad-din, Abdullah ibn Mubarak said, one of the contemporaries of Imam Malik, that isnad is from the deen. This chain of transmission is from the deen. And he said, and if there were not for isnad, people would say whatever they want to say about the religion. So we have the Quran and people who recite it in an uninterrupted chain going back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we have hadith that are called mutawatir that are unbroken, in which we have taken from our teachers, who took from our teachers, who took from our teachers that go back to Imam Bukhari or Imam Tirmidhi, that go back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, unbroken, bila shak, without a doubt. So this should give you some confidence in our deen and our tradition. And this is the framework that I'm telling you into what we're going to get into, right? Because in our deen, and mashallah, I see one of our students from the care program who heard this already from the summer. So we're going to start with this. And like we're going to get some more practical stuff in the third session. We're really laying the usul or the foundation of this topic, right? because it's based in belief, right? Our activism should be based in belief if it's sacred. Can someone tell me the difference in definition between what is objective from something that's subjective? What's the difference between objective truth or something that's objectively true and something that is subjective? It could be subjectively correct. Do you know the difference between objective and subjective? Anyone? Raise their hand. Yes, sister. Okay. And then, so that what would make what would make something objective then? Or so define objective then. I know it's the macabre, the opposite, but go ahead. Very good. So you all heard the sister, right? Something that is subjective is based more upon feelings or opinions. Therefore, that which is subjective is speculative. It is speculative. That was objective is based upon facts, right? And feelings don't always equal facts. One of my teachers, Rahimullah Ta'ala, Sheikh Salim, I remember when I was a young student, I was around some your age, I was like in my early 20s. So he looked at me and he said, Dawood, remember, you can be sincere and be sincerely wrong. Just feeling passionate about something, being sincere about something, that's not enough, right? It's not enough. We should be sincere, but sincerity in and of itself, having a feeling about something, is not sufficient. So how do we decide if we're going to go about something or an issue in activism or anything in the world? How do we know that what is objectively true? Yes. Very good. He said the Quran and Sunnah. So our scholars say one of the ways is known as a khabar sadiq. A khabar sadiq is the word, is a phrase in Arabic. A khabar means report. A sadiq means truthful. Like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was known as a sadiqul amin, the one who always spoke the truth, and the one who always kept his amana. By the way, tonight is the 12th of Rabiul Awal. Many scholars say or believe he was born on the 12th of Rabiul Awal at night, right before Fajr, 1,500 years ago, exactly this year. Our Prophet was born exactly in this month, 1,500 years ago, exactly. Right? So this is the biggest ni'mah that Allah gave us was Al Habib al Mustafa Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Right? The biggest favor that God gave us was this Habib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We wouldn't know how to worship God without Habib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We wouldn't know how to even relieve ourselves, use the bathroom properly without Habib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We wouldn't know how to properly treat our parents with dignity without Habib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We wouldn't know how to liberate our women folk and treat our daughters properly without Habib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Right? So al khabar al sadiq is one. So number one, al khabar al sadiq is broken into three parts, but one actually is not revelation. Right? So we have what's called the tawatur reports. Tawatur reports means something that is widely spreaded, transmitted. Scholars differ on this definition, but Jalaluddin As-Suyuti, rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the great scholars from Egypt, who actually was Persian in ethnicity, who actually had an Habashi or East African wife, Jalaluddin As-Suyuti. He said a transmission as tawatur would be 10 or more people, 10 or more rijal, and we use the word rijal in Islamic scholarship. In hadith, we mean the women too. So Imam Rijal, when we hear the word Rijal, sisters, don't think these Rijal just means brothers with beards. It means sisters with hijab too. Biological women with hijab. Rijal. So let's start off with something that's non-revelation as a basis of truth. The ancient, the medieval Arabs knew of a place called Sin. What is Sin in Old Arabic? China. They knew a place called Sin. By the way, that narration, seek knowledge even to Sin, China, is a was considered a fabricated hadith, but the meaning is true. Like the seek knowledge is a good thing, but that's not a proper hadith. Just to let you know. So the Arabs at the time in Asr Jahiliyyah, in the time of the companions, they didn't have maps. They didn't have TV. They didn't have smartphones. How they know there's a place called China or Sin? It's because they had heard enough reports from different people who had traveled to a location called Sin that had reached them, different people who they could corroborate didn't know each other, who were not in collusion, and they described how China looked. They described how the people look. They described their architecture. They described their food. So the Arabs then said there has to be a place called Sin or China that exists, even though they never eyewitnessed it. So, objectively speaking, they objectively knew there was a place called China. This is the Qabr Sadiq, right? Number two is the Quran is a mutawatir transmission that 10 or more men and also women knew the Quran, had it memorized in their heart, and there actually were um, makhtutat. They were scrolls that were written that were put into manuscripts, right? And we know through man's transmission that the Quran is intact as it was recited by Al Habib sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. It's a mutawatira transmission that has reached us today, right? Now, the tashkil mark, so it's called harakat, that was added during the time of the tabi'in by through the approval of Sayyidina Ali, ridwanullahi alayhi, through Abu Aswad Adu Ali, because when the Quran spread to different areas from Ajami people, non-Arabs, they would see the script, but they would make a mistake in reading the pronunciation, which could change the meaning of the word from like between like a fata and a kasra could change the meaning, right? So that's when Sayyidina Ali did this good bid'ah, right? Because during the time of the Prophet, they didn't use the harakat tashkil, and it was added in so that the Persians and these other people would not make mistakes in regards to reciting Quran. Okay. The other is hadith mutawatira that I mentioned, like in malum biniyat, actions by their intention is called hadith mutawatir, right? Uh, and hadith mutawatir come in two ways. They either were a lafzi or ma'nawi. Lafzi means verbatim. The words are verbatim hadith, or it could be ma'nawi in meaning. So we have books and we've have hadith that have been compiled of al hadith al ahadith mutawatira that beyond a doubt the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it. You can have a hadith that is a singular report that's considered sahih, but it could be questionable because people could disagree about the rijal in the Senate. Someone could say someone is thiqa sound and another person disagrees. But when you have 10 different men or women from the Sahaba that narrate it from 10 different people of the Tabi'een and then it reaches us, then this is something that we can say there's no way possible that anyone could have fabricated this saying about the Prophet. Alayhi salam. Okay? So this is one way we know objective truth. Another way that we understand objective truth is through five senses, through empirical observation, right? With our seeing, hearing, I'm giving you a certain tartib, certain order, right? Our seeing, right? Our hearing, our smelling, our tasting, our touching. We can do empirical observation to come to a conclusion about something being objectively true. And this is very important. We're talking about activism. We're talking about feelings don't equal facts. We're talking about basing our objective and our methodology based upon what is true, right? So I'll give you an example that I've taught to some people, teaching them Aqidah to youth. It's a very simple way of understanding this. Um, let's next time I do this, I'm going to bring some actual lemon. Let's say, let's say I brought some lemon and I chopped it up into little pieces for all of you. And I have all of you close your eyes tight. I said, do not open your eyes. And I say, hold your hands open. And I take this piece of lemon and I drop a little piece of it in each and every one of your hands. I said, okay, taste what I put in your hand. You don't know it's lemon because your eyes are closed. Some of you may trust me, you know me, and you put it in your mouth. Some of you may put it to your nose and you'll smell it. So it smells familiar, like something I know called lemon. So I say, okay, put it in your mouth and taste it for 15 seconds. You put it in your mouth. Some of you might go, make a face. And I say to you, did what you taste, did it taste sweet? Did it taste sour? Or did it taste savory? And if your taste buds are not affected by like COVID long haul syndrome or whatever, you will say, what I tasted was sour. You open up your eyes and I said, what do you see? And you're familiar with something that's been named lemon. And then I say to you, are lemons objectively sweet, savory, or sour? And all of you will say sour. Therefore, through the senses of taste, firstly, we smelled it and then we saw it. We saw something we know as lemon. We smelled it. We're familiar with the smell of lemon. We tasted it. It's sour. We then say lemons are objectively sour. Lemons are not sweet. That is an objective truth. That's not subjective. That's not subjective. We could use the example on other things, and I'll get to that in the last session when we talk about the different huruf or alphabets, right? Because we're establishing something right here, right? We're established. So we have number one, the five senses, and we also have a khabar sadiq, the truthful reports of how we understand objective truth. Now we can have a bunch of facts together, and we still may not come all to the same conclusion. That means we also need a methodology of how we process facts. But at least we have to be dealing at the first step of the game. We have to deal with facts. We can't deal with feelings as the primary motive of our objectives, or for that matter, what is known in Islamic law as fiqh al-awiyat, meaning how we understand our community objectives. Fiqh al-awiyat, how we understand our objectives. All communities have to have objectives and priorities. Alawiyat is better translated as priorities. We have to have our priorities. How do we come about those priorities? We'll get to that. The sacred law gives us a roadmap for how we prioritize things. Maybe at the end of this class, maybe some of us may readjust our priorities. Okay, now we talk about sacred activism. Can someone give me a definition or a difference? Because we're talking about opposites. Sometimes we understand things by their opposites. This is how Allah teaches us, right? Like we truly don't know mild weather or if it's cold unless we've gone through hot. Like last summer, like my son Zayd, I saw him walk in. We were in Iraq in July. Bad time to be in Iraq. It was 128 degrees when we were in Iraq. That's hot, right? You better understand cold by going through hot. You understand light also by knowing its opposite darkness. It's pitch black, right? What is the difference between something that is profane and something that is sacred? Because we're talking about sacred activism here, right? Because a Muslim could be involved in activism for what appears to be an Islamic cause, but it's not sacred. So we're talking about sacred. What is the definition of sacred? And its opposite is profane. Does someone want to take a shot at it? If you don't want to, I can give you the definitions. And by the way, I'm giving you Quranic definitions, not Merriam-Webster definitions. Yes, very good answer. He said, but within the boundaries of Quran and Sunnah would be sacred. And I'll add on another one other caveat to that. Good answer. So when we study any subject like usul fiqh, for instance, if you formally study Islam, you will see that books will always start off with what's called a lughawi definition, meaning linguistic, and then a shari'i definition. So you have lugha, lughawi, linguistic, and shari'i or istihlahi, based upon the discipline. Like even the word, even a word in Arabic, like in English, can have more than one meaning based upon its science or context. Even certain words are used in the Quran and they have different meanings within the same book, depending on the context. They don't mean the same thing. So for instance, the word for sacred in Arabic is hurma, hard ha. Hurma, ha, ra, mim, tamabuta. Hurma, sacred. So there's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. El mu'minu a'zamu hurmatin min al-Kaaba. It means that the believer in his grandeur or importance, this also includes the women, the believer in his grandeur or importance is more sacred than the Kaaba. One believer, male or female, their blood, their honor is more sacred than the Kaaba. By Allah, if we understood this one hadith, we would treat each other much better. We'd be more careful of how we treat each other as Muslims. If we internalize this one hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, el mu'min a'zamu humratil Kaaba, so sacred. And what's the most sacred masjid in Islam? El Masjid al Haram, right? El Haram is related to the word harma in Arabic, right? The most sacred masjid. And what are the precincts called of that masjid? What's it called? Haram, sacred boundaries. So when we're talking about activism that is sacred, we are talking about certain boundaries where we have a heightened consciousness about what is important, what we should do, and what we should abstain from. We have a heightened consciousness about what is important, what we should do, and what we should stay far away from when we are in the haram, right? Like we're not allowed to kill an animal. right? At the haram, for instance, not unless it's for a valid reason, for instance, right? If 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 we are making tawaf and I say ihram, and ihram is related to the word haram too. Ihram, which is the state when we're making umrah hajj, is a sacred state. It's not just a piece of clothing because the women are say ihram, they don't wear the two pieces of cloth like the men, but they're in ihram too. Certain things you can do and can't do, right? So likewise, our activism, if it's sacred, it has boundaries. Okay, and who made El Masha Haram sacred in the Haram? Was it the Saudi government? Was it Amir Mohammed bin Salman? Uh, was it Ali Saud? Or before was it the Ottomans? Or was it Bani Abbas? Was it a king? Was it democracy? Allah is the one who set the boundaries of that sacred precinct. Hence, when we're talking about things that are sacred, we have the opposite, which is profane. Profane is the opposite of sacred, right? So our sacred boundaries are not subjected to public opinion polls. What is sacred to us as Muslims is not subjected to public opinion polls. I will say the third time. Our sacred boundaries as Muslims are not subjected to public opinion polls. They are within the guidelines of the clear ayat, the sariha of the Quran, from the unambiguous speech and action of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and from the ijma, or the consensus of those things that this ummah, starting with the first three generations, always agreed upon about what is good and what is bad. This is how we understand sacred parameters, right? The violation of those then goes to what's called the profane. Hence, we have the word in English, profanity. Profanity is language that is what is not sacred. It doesn't respect the sacred, right? It's profane. It's vulgar. So that's the first thing. The next point is most of our activism, my brothers and sisters in Islam, we are talking about justice, right? Many times people talk about something called social justice, but we need to be clear again on definitions. In Arabic, the word for justice is adala. It's one word, not the only word, but adala. El adala is related to the word el adl. El adl is one of Allah's beautiful names, right? It's one of El Asma al Husna. Lughawi or linguistically, the opposite of this is dhulm. Dhulm can be translated as oppression. It can be translated as wrongdoing. Linguistically speaking, dhulm, which is the opposite of justice, linguistically is to take a thing outside of its proper place. In Arabic, the word dhulm is to take a thing, a thing outside of its proper place. This is dhulm. So when we have justice, there are things that are, linguistically speaking, in their proper places. So Allah Azza wa Jalla al-Adl, right? Is translated as the just. He's the one that set the balance of all things, right? He set the balance of all things. Is Allah who put everything in their proper places as he intended them to function in. So our job is to try to restore all relationships back in the natural world to their proper places as Allah intended them to be. When people take things outside of their proper natural places, this is injustice. And how do we know about this issue about what is just? Well, we've talked about the criterion earlier, right? We talked about a sacred criterion. Allah Azza wa Jal also uses the word in the Quran al-qist, Qaf Sin Ta. It's also known as justice, but this could be translated as equity, maybe is a better word. Inna Allaha yuhibbul muqsitin. Surely Allah loves the people who are equitable. They're just, but they're equitable. This is a level higher than adl. So I give you an example. This is what one of my teachers taught me. Let's say, and there's a story I can relate to this from the about the Sahaba, about some of the later Sahaba that came into Islam. Um, just to give you an example. Let's say I inherited a lot of money, and I say, you know what? This money I have, I'm going to give a certain percentage of it. And let's say everyone in this room, just because you're my friend and we're brothers and sisters, I'm going to give each and every one of you $10,000. Each one of you going to get 10 stacks, each and every one of you. Alhamdulillah. If I give each and every one of you $10,000, irrespective of your circumstance, I acted with adl with each and every one of you, irrespective of your age, irrespective of your ethnicity, irrespective of your gender, your economic class. I give each and every one of you $10,000. Now, if I come into this room and I find out each and every one of your circumstance, and I find out that some of you come from parents or maybe have $1 million worth of assets, and I realize that some of you actually might be in debt, student debt, $20,000, and you come from a single household family, maybe I give some of you more, and maybe some of you I give nothing to. That's qist. I'm distributing equitably. If it's just, I'm giving each and every one of you the exact same amount. Understand what I'm saying? That's the difference. Now, another word that we need to get to and think about in this affair is el-haq. El-haq. El-haq is one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the ultimate reality, right? He is the ultimate reality. He is the truth. And we have something in Islamic law called hukuk, right? Rights. Hukuk al-insan are called human rights, correct? So this is a very important thing for us to understand or to glean from this first session. And keep this in mind again, we're talking about activism. And the activism could be domestic, it could be international, right? It is God, Allah, who is the extender of hukuk al-insan. It is God who gives human rights. Civil rights are different than human rights. So human rights are intrinsic, meaning that they are innate. They are God-given. They transcend time and they transcend space, meaning that human rights are universal. There are certain human rights that are given to all human beings. Who gave them these human rights? God, not man. Okay? Civil rights are different. Civil rights are bestowed to people within a jurisdiction or during certain nation state boundaries. And the only people who have full civil rights in writing are those people who are citizens of that jurisdiction. So I'll give you an example. Thomas Jefferson, who has a very mixed history, um, he's the author of what's called the Declaration of Independence. He wrote in that document, we hold these truths to be self evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. All right, this is what Thomas Jefferson said. So the founders of this country, they recognized that these rights, these human rights, were not given by the king. They were not given by a general. Who did they say they were given by? The creator. These are God-given rights. Now, obviously, that didn't apply to women, that didn't apply to the Native Americans, that didn't apply to Africans. But in words, it was a truthful proposition, right? That America is still struggling to live up to those words in that Declaration of Independence. Really, it was a group of white men declaring their independence from another group of white men. In hakikatan, that's really what that was, right? Nonetheless, there's wisdom to glean from this. Civil rights are different. I'll give you an example. People use this term um, undocumented immigrants. The legal term would be illegal aliens, undocumented immigrants, right? Someone who's an undocumented immigrant doesn't have the same rights as someone who is here on a work visa, who came here legally with a work visa, and someone who is a green card holder who is a legal permanent resident has more rights than that other person, but they don't have rights of a citizen. Like they don't have rights to vote. They don't have rights to bear arms. In some cases, depending on their status, even legally, they don't have even certain rights to certain legal representation in certain times based upon it. Like, for instance, someone's here on a visa, they could get to the border. If they don't have a green card, they're not a citizen, they can come to the border and be turned away, and there's nothing an immigration attorney could do anything about. Why? They don't have the absolute civil right to be in America. And that's for any country, right? I have a friend of mine who's a scholar. They went to Saudi Arabia, who's American, got turned around twice because the government didn't like something he said, so he got turned around twice, right? There's not anyone's absolute right to enter into any jurisdiction. Not mean civil right, right? Human rights are something else, and this is why, mashallah, Allah Ta'ala gave Malcolm X, I believe, basira. He gave this man deep spiritual insight. That's why Malcolm X always said, so this is a tip for you who aren't African Americans or Black Americans. Don't refer to Malcolm X as a civil rights leader. He was not a civil rights leader. It's more appropriate to say he was a human rights leader. He took the plight of African Americans. He was talking about going to the United Nations. He says the issue of our people was not a civil rights issue, it was a human rights issue, right? It was not a civil rights issue because human rights transcend the jurisdiction of the United States of America. Human rights are not a privilege. Human rights are given by God. They are innate and intrinsic. لَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي Adam. Allah says, Quran. So most certainly we have honored all the children of Adam. Like there's a level of like honor and dignity and intrinsic rights that all human beings have. So this is what Malcolm X said, and this also was his language when he talked about when he went to Gaza. A lot of Muslims don't know, American Muslims don't know, Malcolm X went to Gaza. He went to Gaza, right? So he spent he spent 4 months as a guest of Sheikh Al Azhar, by the way, at the time, Mahmoud Shaltut, rahimahullah ta'ala, in Cairo at the time, in an intensive dawah study. Uh, to my knowledge, Malcolm X was the first person that left the Nation of Islam and got any form of ijaza. He got ijaza in dawah from Al Azhar. He's the first one that I know. He actually learned how to write Arabic in the whole 9 yards. A lot of people don't know about the Islamic Malcolm. They only know about the year and a half before he left the nation. They don't know about the Malcolm on the Sunnah, you see. They don't know about the Malcolm on the Sunnah. A lot of us don't, right? So keep this in mind. This nomenclature is very important. And again, before we go to Q&A, because I know Salah time is soon, and Sheikh Al-Masmari is here, Hafizullah Ta'ala, he needs to make some comments. But, and we will dig deeper the next two subjects. Because again, we're just setting the platform of definitions. We're only getting our beak wet. We'll get into the more, we can say, practical, like application things, next class, and more so entirely the third class. But number one, just remember we have a standard for objective truth. We have to remember in our activism the difference between that was objective and that which is subjective. We have objective truth that's based in the khabar al-sadiq, which is the widely transmitted reports from people, which secondarily include the Quran and then the hadith, also the reports of what people eyewitness and ear witness. الخبر الخبر كالمعينة الخبر ليس كالمعينة is a hadith that even hearing oral reports is not equal to eyewitnessing. So even we have like darajat or standards, right? When we talk about evidentiary proof, evidence, right? Eyewitnessing is different from hearing khabar secondhand. الخبر ليس كالمعينة hadith. That we have sacred parameters around this activism, and that these parameters not only guide our objective, but also guide the means of how we seek out these objectives, right? Just like when we go to Hajj or Umrah, there's a sacred objective, and there's certain means that we use for that objective. And the ultimate objective, obviously, is Allah, the rida of Allah. Ultimately, that is our primary objective. Worldly objective is secondary, right? And then we have a framework of justice. And nothing can be inherently just, nothing can be inherently a justice issue that contravenes the definitions of what is beloved or just according to Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can never say something is inherently just or good that Allah Azza wa Jal and His Prophet condemn. And we'll get into we're going to get into specific things relating to activism in objectives and in actions, inshallah. And then also remember that when in our framework amongst ourselves, we need to differentiate the difference between civil rights and human rights. There is a big difference between civil rights and human rights. Sometimes they can overlap. And sometimes a group of people can say something is a civil right that's not actually an inherent human right. They can try to label something a human right is actually not a God-given right. And we can't be confused about that because we live in the age of confusion, right? To the extent that you have people that identify as trans wolves and trans felines, that's confusion. With that, I conclude. Do we have any questions before our Sheikh? Or actually, Sheikh, do you want to address everyone first before the Q&A? Tamam. Okay. Yes, yes, sister. Question. Yes. Okay. So basically, as people in the broader society think something is objectively true, or and even some people in our community think that something is khabar sadiq, and perhaps it's not. I mean, number one, we have to be clear in our own definitions, right? And many times we may not be able to convince other people about our definitions. We have to firstly be clear about our definitions, right? Number two, there's a difference between things that we know as facts, and I'm going to get to that more next class I talked about, but then we could have we can have people who are dealing with objectively the same amount of facts and recognize those same amount of facts and come to a different conclusion with the same set of facts. So sometimes what people will do is they will confuse a khabar sadiq or those things that are factual, they're objectively true as facts. However, they think that the conclusion that they are led to in addressing those facts, they think that that is qati or like binding upon everyone or like incontrovertibly true. And that sometimes is not the case, right? And I think sometimes when we talk about these things of Qabr Sadiq, uh, it's not really about the facts on the ground. It's really about the conclusions that we come to with those facts. So we will touch on that more next class, inshallah, when we go through some of the qawaid, kulliyat al-fiqhiyya. Inshallah, we're going to go over a couple. We're going to go over three legal principles that are very important. And again, we need a methodology, right? So we deal with facts, but then we need a methodology in regards to our conclusion of how we are proactive and also reactive to things on the ground. Inshallah.